So, fellow Christians and secular conservatives, please give me a moment to speak to you. It's my prayer that someone out there, some person on the LGBTQ spectrum, some secular conservative who's appalled by what they've seen lately, and just some progressive, just somebody will hear this, because you need to know the truth. This latest tragedy has provided a useful context for a great warning that I hope you'll at least consider. And I pray that you will heed this warning before it's too late for you. If you're someone who has been either shamed or perhaps you've been sincerely persuaded to get behind the social gospel. More specifically, if you're someone and you have been compelled in some way to stand with the trans movement or the greater LGBTQ plus movement. For example, let's say you're someone who's operating on the belief that the church must be open and affirming. That is to say that you've bought into the idea that there are some sins that cannot be repented from, or that the church must allow certain now prominent lifestyles among its ranks, among its membership, right? We're not just talking about people who come to visit and listen to the preaching once or twice. We're talking about bringing people into membership, right? You now believe that it's important, right? That these people be identified as simply just another version of sexuality that's acceptable, that God affirms it, right? Because it's love. Love is love, right? Jesus never specifically condemned it. Therefore, the church must not treat it as sin. If that's you, if that's your position, you believe that we must affirm these people. We must not question them or try to call out sin for sin and let their hearts be convicted. Please understand right now. This is something called drift. More simply, it's called compromise. But this is what happens when Christians become persuaded to conform the true religion of Christ to fit the norms of the day, or that which culture has determined is acceptable for the day. Secular conservatives, you're guilty too. You've bought into this as well because you've teamed up with the movement to push forward the agenda. Folks, Donald Trump is all for the LGBTQ movement. Make no mistake about it. Right? Now, he might be the best choice for president, but don't be fooled into thinking any other thing. For example, Dave Rubin, another example of a secular conservative, right, who carries the banner for conservatism falsely. You might well believe that there's no harm in it, right? Who am I? Who are you to tell someone who they can or cannot marry? Who are you to tell someone who they can and cannot love? Who are you to impose your idea of morality on someone else's life? And you might sincerely believe that the church should conform to be affirming of these lifestyles because that's the loving thing to do. That's what Jesus would do. Right? That's called drift. It's called compromise. It means that the culture is now coloring or shaping the church. And that is exactly the opposite of Jesus' command and the Great Commission to make disciples of the nations. The church is not supposed to take on the appearance of the culture. The church is there to transform the culture. Right. Put in simple terms, this is how it's supposed to be. We need to welcome in people who identify as trans or LGBTQ in some way. Welcome them in as we would anyone. But make sure they understand they're supposed to leave their sins at the cross. The church is supposed to transform them. They're not to come in and transform the church. That is Christianity. Anything else is just pretending. So if you hear nothing else in this monologue, if you disagree with everything else that I'm saying about this, fair enough. Please at least consider this. Because this is where it becomes a matter of life and death for you too. This movement, and I mean this movement, the LGBTQ plus rights movement, and I'm talking about the one that you hear pumped out from your federal government. You hear pumped out on social media. I'm talking about this movement. These people have been deceived too. As you ought to be able to clearly see from this most recent tragedy and in its wake, the wave of rhetoric flooding the mainstream and social media. The movement has been radicalized. Those who are pulling the strings behind the scenes in the media, behind the scenes in the government, are seeking the complete takedown of the nation, the one you live in. You want rights? If you keep supporting this, you'll have none very soon. It's a takedown of the nation. In other words, to achieve that, the true and believing church must be marked and exterminated. Isn't it ironic that for transgender people, for homosexuals to have a nice and peaceful lifestyle in this nation? If the church was strong, they would. We'd be evangelizing them. We'd be trying to love them and preach the gospel to them, but they would have rights because that's a Christian concept. That's a biblical concept. These people of the LGBTQ movement, who you see and hear in the news and on the social media, have been and are being seduced by these dark forces who appeal to their desires and tell them exactly what they want to hear. The point is this. If you don't hear anything else, hear this. You're being asked, you're being convinced, you're being led by the nose to believe that it is loving to overlook certain lifestyles because certain people have identified themselves with those lifestyles. You're being persuaded to overlook certain sins because certain people are persuading you that it's unloving to say that another person's identity or lifestyle is sinful. As Christians, we have to call good, good, and evil, evil. You're being asked to accept certain sins that might not be obvious on the surface, right? Same-sex attraction, for example. Because that is how Satan has always tried to corrupt God's people. Slowly. Like boiling a frog. If you don't recognize what's happening to you and repent quickly, very soon you're going to be the one who's boiling. Because I can assure you, not because I'm a prophet, but because history has demonstrated this for us time and time again. And God has prepared us. It does not stop with accepting transgenderism as just a normal expression of one's inner self. Very soon, you will be approving and advocating for other things that the church 30 years ago couldn't imagine. Things that you would not dream of compromising on today, soon you will be approving and advocating for, because this movement is not really about trans rights or anyone's rights. This movement is about the destruction of everything, including trans people, including gay men, including lesbians. For example, including the wonderful gay couple who pays their taxes, lives down the street, and hurts no one. This movement is about destroying them too. This movement is fueled by darkness, utter darkness, and at its core is death. And you have to wake up now. You have to pay attention to what's happening. Repent and seek your strength and all truth in the Lord, or you'll be destroyed too. And it's only a matter of time. This movement isn't about rights. It's about total control. It's about the removal of any and all resistance. It's not just means for Christians and secular conservatives. It's not just meant for Christians and secular conservatives. Actually, this warning, this appeal that I'm giving now, this is a call, and it's meant for everyone, including anyone out there who identifies as gay, trans, or somewhere on that rainbow spectrum. If you, by God's providence, happen to be listening to me right now and you're struggling with your identity, if you've accepted as truth that you're trapped in the wrong body and you really empathize with Audrey or Aiden Hale and in some way, and you feel that the world is oppressing you because you're different, please listen. All of you, trans, queer, feminists, anti-racist allies, please listen. You've got to wake up. You've got to wake up right now and question that message. You have to question that message and compare what it's telling you against what is real. You have to question your feelings and not simply accept any and every confusing thought as a signal from your subconscious that you're being called to that lifestyle. Trans people, trans allies, and secular conservatives who have taken up the flag for the movement, and all the progressive so-called liberals who have determined that this movement is a righteous one simply because it feels right, you've got to question this movement. This is a great opportunity to do that. You've got to question those who are promoting it from their ivory towers of control, the people you never see or hear from, who are controlling the narrative. They don't care about you. You know who does care about you? Christians care about you. They care about your soul. These people are using you. Whoever the great Oz behind the curtain is, playing on your emotions and taking advantage of the confusing years of puberty and presenting a version of the world as happy and peaceful place once everyone accepts the truth that there is no truth, only experiences. People are telling you that your experiences define you. That person is deceiving you. That person is lying to you and leading you to an ever-mounting misery. This movement has established itself as a force for the destruction of humanity, not for the good of all people. It's not about tolerance. It's not about unity. It's about destruction. So challenge it. Test it. Listen to what they're saying and challenge it. If you really believe in that movement and you really believe it's true, if you're sure that it's true, then you should have no problem testing it. If it's founded in truth, then it will survive a close inspection. But if it doesn't, and you find holes, even if it doesn't feel good, you have to reconsider your commitment to it. Otherwise, you're living by lies, not truth. If you don't wake up and recognize your true condition in this world, that you cannot do anything to save yourself, and that you will never find peace and happiness within yourself. And if you don't understand that anyone who tells you that your feelings and experiences are your truth is selling you a damnable lie that will only lead you to more confusion. If you don't wake up to the greatest deception of our age and stand on a principle that does not drift and never changes, someday, maybe sooner, maybe later, you're also going to be pushed up against some new idea, some even more obvious and blatantly anti-human ideal. This movement will eventually turn on you and attack you too. Every person has their line. And this movement is designed to find every person's line. In Germany, when the Nazis were in power, there's an old adage, they at first they came for this group, and I said nothing because it didn't affect me. And then they came for that group. I didn't say anything because it didn't affect me. And they came for the Jews, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew and it didn't affect me. And then finally, when they came for me, there was no one left to speak. That's where we are.